What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Imperial Format video, and in this video I'm going to be covering a deck that just cannot seem to die, Exodia. Now, before I get into how this deck works specifically in this format, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do consider subscribing. We're at around 550 subscribers at the time of recording, and I'd really like to reach 600 by the end of the month. And I think with our current rate of growth, we can definitely do that. So if you're not already subscribed, please do. That will also keep you up to date on all the content that I'm releasing. And I do have some pretty fun videos planned, so definitely subscribe if you're not already. In addition, if you want to play any of the formats that I cover on this channel for yourself, we have a Discord server. Link will be in the description down below. It's a great place to find games in all these obscure and underexplored formats. And in fact, starting tomorrow, as of the time of release of this video, at noon EST, we are going to be starting a Yugi Kaiba tournament. So, you know, it may be a bit last minute if you're just learning about this now, but there's still time if you do want to sign up. It should be a lot of fun. Lastly, if you enjoy the video, as always, please do leave a like down below. It really helps out with the video's visibility and it helps the channel out quite a bit. But with all that out of the way, let's dive into Exodia and Imperial. So the last time Exodia was a major contender in a metagame was during Critter Format, where you could use things like the Witch of the Black Forest and Sangans that you had in deck, combined with things like Last Will, Thunder Dragon, a Reborn to bring back some recruiters. You could use all of these cards to search out the pieces quite easily, and there wasn't really much your opponent could do to stop this, as the only real discard card in that format was Card Destruction. There was also White Magical Hat and Robin Goblin, but those were a bit more complicated to actually pull off. So Exodia was a deck that did see Tier 1 status at the current time of recording. That's where it lies in the Critter Format metagame, and I don't really see it falling too drastically anytime soon. However, with the release of Magic Ruler and the 3 hand-drip cards, Delinquent Duo, Confiscation, Forceful Sentry, this deck got a lot less good, as there's no real way to recover your pieces once they hit the graveyard. So if your opponent did fire off a Confiscation or Delinquent Duo, which most decks are main decking, and they happen to hit one of your Exodia pieces, you just kind of lose the game unless you can somehow claw your way back and win through damage. However, this changes drastically with the release of Pharaoh's Servant, and specifically with the release of a trap known as Backup Soldier. Now, Backup Soldier says if there are 5 or more monsters in your graveyard, target up to 3 non-effect monsters with 1500 attack or less in your graveyard and add them to your hand. Now, this isn't perfect. If you lose the head of Exodia, then you still basically lose the game. There are ways to potentially get the head back, but they're too convoluted for my liking. I'll explain them a little bit later in the video after I've gone through this specific deck breakdown. But while Backup Soldier doesn't protect the head, being able to protect any of the other 4 pieces is very important and can actually make this deck a lot more viable than it was in the past. Now, the only real death knell for the deck is if they send the head, and that's 1 card out of 40. And if you're using your searches off Sangan and Witch, well, then, you know, that could be the last piece you search. You could always hard draw it and then get unlucky with their discards, but other than that, the deck is in a pretty comfortable position. That's not to say that I think it's like Tier 1 or anything, as that is a major flaw, but it's definitely better than it was in the past. So with that preamble out of the way, let's discuss the deck itself and some of the other major changes that you see here. So first off, we have the 5 Exodia pieces, the head, and all 4 of the normal monster pieces. All of these are your win condition. They're kind of rough to brick on, but with the inclusion of Backup Soldier in the deck, they can actually be used in some very interesting ways. For instance, we are also playing a Painful Choice here, as if you activate Painful Choice and then send 3 or even 4 of the normal monster pieces, then if you get a Backup Soldier later, you can just add them back to hand, so it functions as deck thinning, and also potentially gives you a good card in hand as well. So the pieces have changed in this deck, and I've even seen some decks sort of using them as fodder for things like Card Destruction. In fact, I myself, in my initial build of this deck, was playing things like Magic Jammer and just discarding pieces because I figured I could just get them back later with Backup Soldier. It turns out that this control sort of build was not the best, and I want to give major credits to Discord users Blah and Soul Emerald 69 for sort of changing the way I view this more aggressive build of the deck and convincing me that it actually has some major potential. So big shout out to them. They're a major influence on building this deck and also my philosophy behind it. Of course, besides the pieces, we are playing as many of the recruiters as we can. So we're playing 2 Sangan, 1 Witch of the Black Forest, because Witch is limited now, so you can't play 2 like you did in Critter. But still, it's decent enough to have 3. Being able to search out 3 pieces is very nice, and there's a bit more graveyard recursion in this format, which means that you're able to bring back these recruiters more often. We're also playing 3 Mystic Tomato to fetch out these recruiters. They can also be used to fetch out other tomatoes, and even something like a Cannon Soldier, which we are playing in this deck for reasons I'll get into shortly. So Mystic Tomato has a lot of interesting applications. Of course, since I brought up Cannon Soldier, I will mention why we're playing it. This card can be very good if your opponent does manage to discard your head, or even manage to banish one of your other pieces with something like Soul Release, which is a major threat after sideboarding that people can side in. Cannon Soldier can be used to sort of deal more damage when you need to go the damage route, but more importantly, it can be used to trigger Last Will, of which we are playing 2 copies. Now, Last Will is a bit iffy in this format, as Imperial Order does exist, so if you activate Last Will, it could just get ordered. But I do think it's good enough to play, as being able to ram a recruiter into one of your opponent's monsters, then Last Will out another recruiter in the battle phase and ram that as well, is just very powerful. Adding 2 pieces to hand can be very, very explosive, especially if you've got something like a Call of the Haunted or a Premature Burial setup to bring back that recruiter yet again. So Last Will is very good in this deck, I think. I wasn't a believer when I first started building it, but after playing a couple games, I see the immense value in this card. It can also be triggered through things like Thunder Dragon, which we're playing 3 copies of. It serves as deck thinning, and being able to tribute over a monster and activate Last Will is extremely good. We're also playing a pretty decent suite of flip monsters. We're playing 2 Magician of Faith to be able to get back Graveyard Revival like Monster Reborn or Premature Burial, but also just to get back any of the other extremely powerful spells that might end up engraved. Things like Pot of Greed. Being able to get back off Magician of Faith is very nice. So I do think Magician of Faith is worth playing in this deck. We're also playing 2 Morphing Jar number 2, which I know a lot of people do have issues with. There is the potential chance of Morphing Jar number 2 flipping up on your side of the field and surviving an attack potentially, or if your opponent activates swords on it, then it will shuffle itself back into deck, and if it does hit the head of Exodia, then you kind of lose the game. But I do think that the risk is worth taking, as this card is so good at stopping your opponent's aggressive pressure and potentially even milling some very powerful spells or traps. I also do think that if you play this card right, then you can really decrease the risk of it actually, messing up your plans and bringing out a head. Most of the times when I've used this card, I've been able to basically guarantee that it won't stick on field and get shuffled back with its effect. But it is a risk that some people are not willing to take. Lastly, we have 2 Giant Soldiers of Stone here. I think that this card is very good in this deck, as 2K defenders are very hard to get over. Sure, things like Jinzo are running around, and there is a potential beatdown deck that can get over Giant Soldier of Stone, but I think that it's very nice to have. And also, as an added benefit, it can be brought back with Backup Soldier. So I really like this card. That's why we're playing 2 of it. We don't necessarily want to ever search this with a Sangan, but it's good to have 2 copies to potentially draw them. And if you can get back 2 of these with Backup Soldier when you don't need the Backup Soldier to get back multiple pieces, then you can get back a very powerful monster multiple turns in a row. Moving on to the spells, we of course have a ton of limited spells on this list. Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, Painful Choice, Pot of Greed, Premature Burial, Raigeki, Swords, Forceful Sentry, and Upstart Goblin. All of these are incredibly good in this deck, even though they are limited. I think Swords has gotten a bit less good, given all the spell and trap removal running around in this format, but I still think it's worth playing, as if it does manage to stick, it can be very good at stalling your opponent. And I think of the hand rips, Forceful is the one that we want to go with, because it doesn't cost you life points, and also it does give you hand knowledge, which I think is more valuable for the Exodia deck than just getting the card advantage that Delinquent Duo provides. For the non-limited spells, we've got 2 Last Will. As I mentioned, this is great at bringing out recruiters. Maybe you could play this at 3, but I found that it can brick pretty easily, so I only really want 2 of this. And we're also playing 2 Mystical Space Typhoon. This is mainly to deal with things like Imperial Order, as that card can be incredibly annoying if your opponent's able to flip it up when you're trying to make a big Last Will play. For the traps, we have the 2 backup soldiers as I mentioned before. We've got a Call of the Haunted to bring back our recruiters. We've got Imperial Order to stop our opponent from firing off either hand destruction, noblemen of crossouts, whatever things might disrupt our Exodia game plan, this card can be good at stopping. And lastly, we've got a Mirror Force because this is a great defensive tool. For the side deck, I think some of the side deck is a little bit iffy, but I'm okay with most of it. We've got 3 Solemn Wishes for the Burn matchup, as Burn can be pretty brutal, given that these are both very slow decks, and the Exodia deck can't really get aggressive to kill Burn early. We also have a Ceasefire and 2 Noblemen of Crossouts to deal with Empty Jar, as Empty Jar can be a real problem for this deck, as they can send Exodia pretty easily. We have a Mystical Space Typhoon in case we're going up against a back row heavy deck, 2 Fissures in case we need more removal, a Confiscation to side in if we're sure we're going first. I don't feel comfortable putting this in the main deck, but if we know we're going first, we might as well play it. And another Magician of Faith to get back more spells. We've got a Jinzo here if we want to switch up our game plan into something a bit more aggressive. I don't really side this in often, but I could see people siding in if they want. And lastly, 3 Trap Hole in case you're going up against a more beatdown focused deck. But that's going to do it for my take of the deck. As I said earlier, there are multiple ways to build this, including ways that sort of do have a way to get back the head if it does get sent to the graveyard. The main way to do this is through the quick play spell Monster Recovery. Basically, if the head gets sent to the graveyard or is put out onto the field, you're hoping that you'll be able to draw Monster Recovery and some form of graveyard revival spell to basically revive the head from the graveyard, activate Monster Recovery, which will shuffle it back into the deck. However, I think that this is too much of a pipe dream to actually be worth playing, and most of the time you'll just be bricking on Monster Recovery rather than it actually getting the value of getting the head back. So I don't personally like that card and strategy in this deck, but I definitely see if you sort of want to just cover all your bases and have a way to get back that Exodia head no matter what, then, you could definitely play it. It's just not for me. But now that we've gotten all this out of the way, let's dive into some games and show off this deck in action. Okay, we've got a game here against History of YGO1, who is the Discord user Blah that I mentioned earlier, so it's quite fitting that I'm playing this sort of aggro Exodia build against one of the major champions of this deck. So, always a pleasure to have them on the channel. Let's see how these games go. Looks like they're going to go first here, which is quite unfortunate. Exodia does generally want to go first, and in rare cases it can actually win on the first turn, essentially. So, you want to go first, but this is an okay hand, I'd say. They're just going to bring out a Sangan, set 1, and pass back to us. Painful Choice is a very good draw. We're just going to try and fire that, and deck thin quite a bit here. So we're going to send 3 of the normal pieces. We have the 4th one in hand. We're going to send a Sangan and also a Forceful Sentry. They're going to give us the Sentry here, which is very interesting. And we're going to fire off that Sentry, see what they've got in hand. This is a decent hand for them. Honestly, given that we don't really care too much about the Mechanical Chaser, given we've got Morphing Jar, I think we're fine letting them have that. Snatch Steal doesn't really affect us because we're not going to be summoning too many monsters face up on the field. Call would be annoying, but again, Morphing Jar number 2 can deal with that a little bit by shuffling back the Sangan into deck. So I think I am going to just send back the Change of Heart, as that is kind of the most annoying for us. So we shuffle that back, and we're going to discard this Thunder Dragon, add the 2 additional Thunder Dragons from our deck to hand. That pairs well with Last Will potentially later. We're going to set this Morphing Jar number 2, set a Call of the Haunted, pass back to them. They fire a Dust Tornado, which is very interesting. We weren't quite expecting that because we figured that they would fire Dust Tornado on the Forceful Sentry activation to set something like a Change of Heart. But they saved it, and they're just going to snipe our back row. So that will get rid of the call, which is a bit unfortunate. We can't call the Haunted back our Sangan to get another piece, and they're going to choose to set another card with Dust Tornado's effect. They're going to draw here, bring out a Mechanical Chaser, that's fine by us, and they're going to attack into our set here. That will shuffle their monsters back into the deck, and they'll mill until they reach 2. They're milling some good ones here, but they hit 2 Mystic Tomatoes there, and that will be the end of their turn after they set one more card and pass back to us. Very glad to see Pot of Greed and Premature Burial both gone, as those are two very powerful cards. Mirror Force is a very good card here. We're just going to set the leg of the Forbidden One here and set the Last Will and Mirror Force here, pass back to them. We could have maybe kept the left leg in hand, as, you know, this means that we'll have to use 2 backup soldiers to get back all our pieces. But the reason I wanted to do this was so that way we could do Last Will with Thunder Dragon next turn, which I do think is quite important to get online. So they're going to flip up the Mystic Tomato there, flip up another Mystic Tomato, and they're going to attack into our leg. We're going to flip up a Mirror Force to get rid of those two. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw Raigeki, which is pretty good, but we don't really need it just yet. We're going to Tribute set over our left leg, and they're going to be fine with that. We're going to fire off a Last Will here, getting out a Witch, and we're going to pass back to them. Maybe we should have set the Raigeki to play around Delinquent Duo a little bit, but I figure that we want to get them to use up their hand removal stuff now rather than later when we potentially have the head. Looks like they're going to Confiscation instead of Duo. Still unfortunate. They're going to hit Raigeki. That's a very good card. And they're going to pass back to us. We draw Sangan, which is pretty decent. We'll set that and pass back to them. They're going to bring out a Dark Elf, which is a sign that this deck is probably like a beatdown sort of deck, or like beat down good stuff, potentially. I'm not the biggest fan of Dark Elf, but I do know that some people do like it. Dark Elf's going to attack into the Thunder Dragon, pass back to us. Mystical Space Typhoon's pretty decent, but we're going to keep it in hand to try and bait out more hand destruction, as with the Raigeki. And they're going to attack into our set here, paying another 1,000. We're going to Sangan and search a Giant Soldier of Stone, as that does rebuff Dark Elf. Main 2, they're just going to pass back to us. We draw Premature Burial, so we could use that to potentially bring back a monster later. But we're just going to set this Mystical Space Typhoon and pass back to them. I think we didn't want to commit the Giant Soldier of Stone because we're afraid if they have a massive board clear. But I think we probably just should have done it. They're going to try and Dust Tornado our Mystical Space Typhoon in the end phase, but since this is Imperial format at a time when you can activate quick play spells with the turn they're set, we're going to chain this Mystical Space Typhoon and hit their back row. So that will hit the Call of the Haunted. They did not have a Recruiter Engraved to bring back with Call of the Haunted and get value off of that. So unfortunately for them, it will just die. And they're going to activate Painful Choice, sending a couple pretty good ones. This is a bit tricky for us, as all of these can mess up our plans quite a bit. If we want to set Giant Soldier of Stone next turn, Nobleman of Crossout is of course disastrous for that. Same with Raigeki. Cyberjar can just be used to clear our board no matter what, and also if it does hit a head, we're kind of dead in the water. So really, the choices are kind of Delinquent Duo or Forceful Sentry. And given that they're already almost halfway through their life points, I think we actually want to give them Delinquent Duo. If they don't hit Thunder Dragon, we just pitch the Thunder Dragon afterwards. And if they do, we get our choice between Premature Burial and Stone. So I think I am actually going to give them the Delinquent Duo, even though it feels kind of weird here. So they're going to grab the Delinquent Duo there. They're going to flip up a Masked Sorcerer, which is pretty disastrous for us because they'll be able to get a draw here. And they're going to attack in with the Masked Sorcerer, draw a card there, attack in with the Witch, and then attack in with the Dark Elf. So they're going to think about this a bit, and they are going to fire this Delinquent Duo indeed. So they're going to roll the dice and hit the Premature Burial, which is honestly the better choice between that and Stone, as they can't actually get over Stone. We'll pitch this Thunder Dragon here, and they'll pass back to us. We're going to gain 1,000 from that Snatch Steal, and we could potentially set the Magician of Faith here to get back a powerful spell. But I think what we want to do is actually just set the Giant Soldier of Stone. Oh, I guess we're summoning the Giant Soldier of Stone? Oh, okay, I see. We want to clear the Masked Sorcerer to prevent them from getting more draws here. That makes sense. And also, if they do attack with Dark Elf, they got to drop down to 1,600. So we're getting to a range where we could potentially win with damage. We're also at 5,000 life points, so it's unlikely they can kill us here. They're going to bring out a Goblin Attack Force, attack over our Giant Soldier of Stone, attack in with the Witch of the Black Forest, and they could potentially attack in with the Dark Elf here, dropping us down to 900, but they choose not to because they are running incredibly low on life points. That Goblin Attack Force will switch back to defense mode, and Mystic Tomato is probably one of the best draws we could get here. We'll bring that out, attack over the Goblin Attack Force there, and pass back to them. So now, if they do want to clear the Mystic Tomato, they've got to attack in with the Dark Elf. They could crash the Witch into the Tomato to prevent us from gaining more life points, but then we get a search. So we're feeling very, very good about this. They're going to fire a Dark Hole, which is a big play on their part. We will get a search with the Witch of Black Forest. We're going to grab another Tomato. And they're just going to pass back to us, so I feel perfectly fine here summoning out Tomato and just attacking in for 14. We could potentially just win through damage here. Main two, we're going to set a backup soldier, because why not? And we're going to pass to them. They're going to set 2 and pass back to us. We draw another backup soldier. We're just going to try and get in for game here. Unfortunately, they do have a Mirror Force, so Mystic Tomato will die. We'll set this Magician of Faith, though, and I feel pretty confident about this because they've used up, like, Raigeki and Dark Hole. I guess they could have another Nobleman or, like, a Change of Heart. That would be pretty rough. But if they don't have those, I think we can just win the game here. We're going to set another backup soldier because, again, why not? Pass back to them, and unfortunately, they do have Change of Heart, so that's pretty rough. They can Change of Heart and then Premature Burial back a monster from their graveyard. That would be pretty bad, but I don't think it will necessarily kill us here unless they have another monster in hand. So they're going to Magician of Faith, and they're going to grab back the Pot of Greed, as the Premature Burial line probably wouldn't actually win them the game here. And they're going to fire this Pot of Greed, draw 2, tribute over the Magician of Faith for a Jinzo, which is just disastrous for us. And then they're going to Monster Reborn to bring back another monster. So that will just be the end of the game through damage. But I do think we got pretty close to winning that game on our own. Now, to be fair, the only reason we were able to get so close damage-wise was because they were cutting down their life points with Dark Elf, which is one of the reasons I'm not the biggest fan of the card. But still, that was a surprisingly close game. So we're going to go into Game 2, and we are going to go first here. So let's see how we do in Game 2 and whether we can turn the tides a bit more. We have 2 Exodia pieces in the opener, which is pretty decent. Unfortunately, one of them to the head, so it's a bit rough. A bit iffy here. We're going to summon out the Sangan, set a Mystical Space Typhoon, pass back to them. The reason we summon the Sangan is if we set it and they Nobleman of Cross out it, then we're pretty much dead in the water. They're going to draw, summon out a Mystic Tomato, and attack in to the Sangan here. We'll lose 400 from that, and we're going to just grab another piece. Maybe this isn't the best choice, as we don't really have a follow-up play here. But we've got 3 pieces, so we're getting very close to assembling Exodia, and given how explosive the Exodia deck can be, I think it's worth doing. So they are just going to set 1 and pass back to us. We could Mystical Space Typhoon in the end phase, but I don't really feel the need to. And that last will draw is very good, especially with Dark Hole. This basically can guarantee that we win the game. If we draw a Recruiter or find some way to bring back the Sangan, we can Dark Hole Last Will to bring out another Recruiter, and that will just be all the pieces in hand. Unfortunately, we have 7 cards in hand, so we've got to commit something to board here unless we want to discard it. So we are going to set the Last Will, and I think maybe this was a bit of a mistake. I think maybe we should have just discarded a Thunder Dragon, as holding on to the Last Will with the Dark Hole is just so big here. Unfortunately, they will Dust Tornado that, and it is Last Will, so we lose our big sort of, big push that we'd make later on, and that might be pretty bad for us. That might cost us the game, but let's see if we're able to still pull it out either way. They're going to attack in for 2,400. We draw Call of the Haunted, so maybe this would have been the end of the game. Although, to be fair, if we had saved the Last Will and set the Call of the Haunted here, they would have just fired Dust Tornado on the Call of the Haunted. So, probably not the biggest deal here. Probably wouldn't have made too much of a difference. Although, if we had fired the Mystical Space Typhoon preemptively on the Dust Tornado, maybe that would have mattered. So, we're just going to set this Call of the Haunted. That can still get us a Recruiter later. They're going to attack in for 2,400. And they're going to set 1, pass back to us. Maybe we should have fired Call of the Haunted in the end phase to get back Sangan, but if that set is Mystical Space Typhoon, they could just deal with it that way anyways. This Magician of Faith is pretty good. We could get back the Last Will, and that will just be basically full combo. So we're going to set the Magician of Faith here, pass back to them, and they unfortunately have another Change of Heart. That is devastating. That is almost the end of the game here, honestly. They're going to flip up the Magician of Faith here, and they're going to grab back this Change of Heart and summon out a Mystic Tomato. Try attacking in for everything. Now, here's the issue. If we Fire Call the Haunted and bring back Sangan, they can still kill us because it'll be 400 through a tomato attack and then 2400 through the Sangan and tomato they've got on field. So what we actually have to do here is we've actually got to Fire Call the Haunted and bring back a Thunder Dragon. It's not pretty, but it's what we got to do. And they'll pass back to us. We do have this Dark Hole in hand, so we can clear the field. Maybe we should have used Dark Hole earlier, but we really wanted to save it for the Last Will Recruiter play. Unfortunately, now things don't look like they're going to go that way. We're just going to fire this Dark Hole here, clearing the board. They will get a search off the Sangan, which is a bit unfortunate. They're going to grab a White Magical Hat. And we're just going to pass back to them. We could have potentially set the Cannon Soldier, but we know that they've got Change of Heart in hand. So we can't actually do that because then they just Change of Heart the Cannon Soldier, flip it up, attack him with my Magical Hat and Cannon Soldier, and tribute off with Cannon Soldier to end the game. So unfortunately, we just kind of have to keep everything in hand, even though we do know about the White Magical Hat. And if they hit the head, then we're in a pretty tough spot. But to be honest, we're in a pretty tough spot either way. So they're going to roll the dice to decide what to hit here, and they are going to hit the left leg. So not the head, we can get that back. But they do have Soul Release, which will get rid of that leg. Now, we just concede here because, you know, if we summon out the Cannon Soldier to clear the White Magical Hat, then they just Change of Heart it. Honestly, if we summon out anything to clear the White Magical Hat, they just Change of Heart it. So there's no real way to win through damage here, unless we draw like a Mirror Force. And now our main way of actually winning through Exodia is just completely deprived for us. So we just concede. Maybe we should have played it out more, but I think that would just be the end of the game either way. But this wasn't the last game that I played with this deck against History of YGO 1. I thought that, you know, maybe if I'd played this game differently, we could have actually pulled it out. So I wanted to see more of the deck in action. So we played a couple more games after this. So let's dive in to the second one of those. Okay, we've got our second game against History of YGO 1. We are still playing the Exodia aggro deck. They are playing their good stuff, beatdown sort of deck. I'd probably classify it as more beatdown than good stuff. But I could definitely see it going either way. A lot of jank decks are in this kind of nebulous position where they've got to essentially function as good stuff decks except for a couple cards. And it seems like that's what their deck is doing here. But we open with a pretty great hand. Thunder Dragon, Last Will, Change of Heart, Cannon Soldier. This is insane. And we have a Mystic Tomato to act as a great first turn set. So we're feeling incredibly good about this. We're going to set that Mystic Tomato, pass back to them. They're going to T-set and pass there. And we draw Painful Choice on top of it. This is just absolutely insane. We're going to fire that Painful Choice and see if that actually goes through. It will indeed go through. So we're just going to send 3 normal pieces, a Sangan and a Forceful Sentry. The same sends that we sent last game, because I do think that it's good to not force yourself to have to use both backup soldiers in the game. Let's see what they give us here. They are going to choose to give us the Sangan, which honestly we're fine with. We're going to Change of Heart their set, and unfortunately it's a Witch, so we can't get too great a value off this, but we're just going to Tribute Summon over it for a Thunder Dragon. They're going to search out with the Witch, and they're going to grab a Mystic Tomato. Very good search there. And we're going to just attack in with the Thunder Dragon because why not? This deck can potentially win through damage, so might as well just open up that avenue if we can. They're going to Snatch Steal the Thunder Dragon and Tribute over it for a Jinzo, which is rough, but honestly it's not the worst. We're going to bring out a Witch of the Black Forest off that Mystic Tomato, and they're going to pass back to us. We draw a normal piece of Exodia, which is great. If we draw Backup Soldier later in the game, we can get back those 3 pieces, and with something like Sangan and Witch, you know, it's very easy to search out the head. We're going to switch the Witch to defend a Sangan here and pass back to them. They're going to bring out a Mystic Tomato. They are going to clear the Witch with that. We're going to grab a Morphing Jar number 2. I think maybe this should have been our second search off of the Sangan. But, you know, we're playing around if they just go to main 2 and nobleman the Sangan there. So they're going to hit over the Sangan. We grab a Mystic Tomato. Main 2, they're just going to set another pass back to us. Upstart Goblin's pretty good. We'll fire that. Draw one deeper into our deck, and we draw another Last Will. So we've got a great Cannon Soldier Last Will turn here. We are going to think a bit, and we're going to set the Morphing Jar number 2. Of course, if they have Nobleman of Crossout, this is disastrous. But if they do have Nobleman of Crossout, then the next turn we can bring out a Mystic Tomato set and potentially search out the other Morphing Jar number 2 in our deck. So we're going to set that, and since we do have 7 cards in here, we're going to set a Premature Burial. Yes, this does die to spell and trap removal, but Premature Burial would die to spell and trap removal anyways. So we're feeling fine about that. We'll pass back to them, and they're just going to attack into our set here. It's Morphing Jar number 2, so that will shuffle back their monsters into the deck. And they're going to hit a Goblin Attack Force and a Jinzo. So quite unfortunate if they do have some Graveyard Revival for that Jinzo, but if they don't, we're feeling pretty good. Unfortunately, it looks like they do, so they're going to revive that Jinzo and get in for 2,400 more. Quite unfortunate, but we're still doing okay. We got 5,600 life points, so this is fine, and Pot of Greed makes it incredibly good. We're going to draw 2 off the Pot of Greed. We draw Raigeki, which is insane, but instead of firing the Raigeki, we're just going to clear that the Goblin Attack Force, not Giant Soldier of Stone. And we're going to set a Last Will passing back to them. I think maybe we should have just discarded the Thunder Dragon here. Again, like the previous game, setting the Last Will could get majorly punished. But I think having a Thunder Dragon in hand to bring out and trigger Last Will that way, in case we want to use Cannon Soldier on a different turn, is pretty good. So they're going to draw for turn and just attack into our Mystic Tomato. They will clear it. We'll bring out a Sangan here. And main 2, they're just going to bring out a Dark Elf, likely just as a defensive option here. And they're going to pass back to us. And honestly, this is why we saved the Raigeki, because now we can fire Raigeki, clear 2 very powerful monsters, set this Magician of Faith here, and I think maybe we should have just attacked in with Sangan, just get more damage. But I feel like we're in a very good position just to win the game through Exodia, so we don't actually go for that. Maybe that was a mistake, maybe it will come up, but I feel fine doing this. They're going to bring out a Sangan, and they'll attack into our set. It's Magician of Faith, so we're going to grab back a Pot of Greed here. I think, honestly, we could have grabbed the Change of Heart, and that would have been fine as well. But I think we're trying to draw into the backup soldiers, so that way we can just win the game. But they're just going to set one pass back to us. And we do draw the head, so if we draw a backup soldier, we basically win the game here. We're going to fire off a Pot of Greed, and that's going to be fine with them. And we draw Monster Reborn. And actually, this opens up another line to victory for us. Because if we Monster Reborn their Jinzo, and we bring out Cannon Soldier, tribute off Sangan, Last Will, Premature Burial, then we just have a ton of damage on board. Because then we can tribute off our entire board afterwards for Cannon Soldier later. So this is just an insane amount of damage on board. So I think actually I'm just going to go for a damage win here. We're going to think about this for a bit just to do the calculations. And we do actually eventually decide just to go for it. We're going to Monster Reborn, target Jinzo. They're going to fire a Waboku preemptively because they see that we probably have some way to get a bunch of damage in. But this just delays us by 1 turn. We're going to set a Call of the Haunted in case they do manage to clear the Jinzo here and pass back to them. They're going to switch this Sangan to defense, which will be a bit of a defensive buffer here, but I don't think it will actually end up mattering here. We are going to have to recalculate given that they switched Sangan to defense, but I think it's ultimately fine. So we are going to bring out the Cannon Soldier, tribute off this Sangan, deal 500 to them. We'll search out a Magician of Faith because the last 3 monsters in our deck were Magician of Faith, Giant Soldier of Stone, Mystic Tomato. So we need to Last Will the Giant Soldier of Stone and the Mystic Tomato to actually get enough damage on board. We're going to fire Last Will here, bring out that Giant Soldier of Stone, fire another Last Will to bring out the Mystic Tomato, and we're going to Premature Burial back a monster from our grave, and this will just be enough damage to kill them. So they'll just go to game 2. And, you know, we didn't win through Exodia there. If we had drawn backup soldier, maybe we could have. But I think that showed that the deck can potentially win even without Exodia. So I think that's a very necessary sort of thing to be able to do for this deck, as it is so disruptible. But when the stars align and everything goes right, you can indeed win. So good to see that that works that way. I think that is probably one of the reasons why I view this deck as tier 2 instead of potentially rogue, as it does have other options after its main win condition's been disrupted. But I hope that we can actually pull off that main win condition, because we've been very close in a couple of games here, but we haven't quite done it yet. And I do know that the deck can do it. So let's dive into game 2 here. Let's see if we can actually win through Exodia. They're going to draw for turn, set 2, pass back to us. Call of the Haunted is not the best here. Honestly, this is a pretty rough hand, as we don't have any spells to bring back the Magician of Faith. So we're going to set a Mystic Tomato, pass back to them. They're going to summon out a Mystic Tomato of their own, flip up a Sangan, and start attacking in here. We will lose our Mystic Tomato and bring out a Witch of the Black Forest. If they want to crash their Sangan into our Witch, then, they get a search off that, but at least Witch of the Black Forest is on field. And we can switch this to defense to force them to attack into it with Mystic Tomato first next turn. So we're just going to pass back to them, and we draw Dark Hole. That's a very good one. We might actually consider using the Dark Hole in conjunction with the Witch of the Black Forest. That way we can set the Magician of Faith later. But it looks like instead of that, we're just going to switch the Witch to defense, set a Giant Soldier of Stone, set the Call of the Haunted, and pass back to them. They're going to Mystical Space Typhoon the Call of the Haunted, so maybe we should have waited on that. But they could have just done this during our end phase, so it doesn't really matter. They're going to attack into our set here. It's Giant Soldier, and they've got to rush recklessly to get over that. Kind of unfortunate. But they don't have a way to clear the Witch yet, and so they'll pass back to us. We're going to switch the Witch to attack over that Sangan there, so that will deal them 100. They will get a search here, so they're going to grab a White Magical Hat, which is kind of rough. And in order to prevent them from actually being able to use that White Magical Hat next turn, we're going to fire the Dark Hole here, grabbing a Thunder Dragon in hand, so that way we can discard that for some searches. We're going to grab 2 more Thunder Dragons. And now we can just set this Magician of Faith here, set a backup soldier, pass back to them. I don't really think it's necessary to set the backup soldier here, and it might be a bit risky because we don't necessarily want to lose this, but it can be used to get back the Giant Soldier Stone once one more monster hits the graveyard. So I feel okay about doing this. They're going to fire a Forceful Sentry, shuffle back this right leg of Exodia, which honestly would have preferred if they confiscationed that. But they're just going to set 1, pass back to us. And given that they set here instead of getting aggressive, we are actually going to flip up the Magician of Faith, get back the Dark Hole, fire that Dark Hole, clear the board. And I'm very glad we did that, because Cyberjar could make a very bad game state for us. So we're just going to set this Magician of Faith, pass back to them. And we keep the Mystical Space Typhoon in hand because we don't really want to fall into a heavy trap. And also, if they do have more hand destruction, then they might want to use it here. Also, keeping the Mystical Space Typhoon in hand makes it so that it's not 100% guaranteed that we set Magician of Faith. So it'll be interesting to see what they actually do here. They're going to bring out a Dark Elf, and they're going to attack in for 1,000. Clearing this Magician of Faith, we are going to grab back a Dark Hole here. Main 2, they're going to pass back to us. We draw a Sangan, which is pretty good. We could honestly just backup soldier here, getting back the Giant Soldier of Stone, as they don't really have a way to clear it with the Dark Elf. So we could go for that, but we're just going to set the Sangan here, set a Dark Hole in case they do bring out the White Magical Hat, and pass back to them. They're going to set 1 and attack into our set, so they will pay 1,000 for that. And we are going to grab a Morphing Jar number 2, which I think is pretty good here. We draw another Sangan, so we're going to set that, figuring that they probably won't want to bring out the White Magical Hat to board if they think that this is a Morphing Jar number 2. So they're going to activate Pot of Greed, draw 2 cards here, and they're going to fire a Mystical Space Typhoon, sniping the Dark Hole. Makes sense. They figure that we probably set that, given that they could have potentially gotten a White Magical Hat hit in. So I think that that made sense on their part. And they're going to fire a Dark Hole here, clearing our Sangan. We'll grab a left arm to hand, because with Backup Soldier, if it does get discarded, it's basically free discard fodder. And they fire Card Destruction. Oof, that's pretty brutal. But honestly, I don't feel too bad about this. We lose Morphing Jar number 2, which is a really big hit. But we do have Backup Soldier to get back that piece. So we feel very good about this. Honestly, if they white magical hat hitting this left leg, we are perfectly fine because we can get back 2 Exodia pieces and the Giant Soldier of Stone. So we feel very good about this. They're going to fire a Soul Release now, and we will chain backup Soldier to that to prevent them from actually keeping us off Exodia here. So we are going to... Oh, we don't add the Giant Soldier. I think that's a major misplay on my part. I guess I just forgot about it. But we really should have added back that Giant Soldier, as that could have been very important here. They're going to set another pass back to us, and we get some pretty good draws there. Upstart Goblin, so we'll gain them 1,000, but we get more draws here. Pot of Greed. Cannon Soldier is a pretty decent one. We can Cannon Soldier in Last Will, potentially bring out a Sangan, and then crash with their White Magical Hat. We could also Reborn our Sangan and crash that way. That might be the move. We're definitely going to think about this for a while here. And we are going to indeed fire the Monster Reborn, targeting our Sangan, and that will go through. So we're going to Fisher away the White Magical Hat. I guess we're saving the Last Will for later. I think, honestly, we should have just fired the Last Will, though, there. I think that would have been better. Oh, I guess one reason we do that is we did see that they were on Rush Recklessly, so if they've got another, we don't want to crash our Sangan into that and then lose a card from hand. So I guess that makes sense. But they're going to set another pass back to us. And we're going to summon out a Cannon Soldier. That's fine by them. We're going to fire this Last Will, because if they do have Mirror Force, then we get a monster out in battle phase. If they don't, we tribute off Sangan at the end of the turn here. And we potentially win through that way. Unfortunately, they do have an Imperial Order here, so they will have to fire that. And we will just attack in with Sangan and Cannon Soldier for 2,400 here. Main 2, we're just going to set this Mirror Force, set the Raigeki, because why not, and pass back to them. They are unfortunately going to Dust Tornado our Raigeki, but honestly, with Imperial Order up, that's not too bad of a thing. We also have the Mirror Force to deal with if they've got aggressive pressure here. And I think we could potentially just win the game here. They're going to let the Imperial Order lapse, set 1, pass back to us. And we're just going to try attacking in here, because if this does connect, we do just win the game. So we'll attack in for 2,400. They drop down to 1,100. Main 2, we can set a monster here and distribute off our entire board for Cannon Soldiers. So that will just be the end of the game. Unfortunately, oh, it looks like they did have the Rush Recklessly, so I am glad we did make the Fisher play. But yeah, this is just quite unfortunate for them. So we managed to win game 2 through damage both times. Very weird. Normally you'd try to go for Exodia, and I do think we got pretty close to getting Exodia in these games. But damage was just the more expedient way to win, so we did that. I wouldn't feel satisfied putting out an Exodia video if I didn't at least make one more attempt to try and actually assemble Exodia in hand. So we played one more match after this. I said, you know, if we don't assemble Exodia, then we don't assemble Exodia, but I gotta try one more time. So let's dive into that third game. Okay, we've got game 3 here, and hopefully we'll be able to pull off the combo, but I mean, as long as we win, I guess it's fine. But, you know, with jank decks like this, I don't really count them as successful unless they can actually pull off their win condition once in a while, even if they are winning. So I'd really like to see Exodia win through Exodia, but let's hope that this game will be the one that does it. This is a decent opener. Oh, Mirror Force makes it a lot more decent, I'd say. We're going to start by setting the Sangan, setting Mirror Force, and passing back to them. If they main deck Nobleman of Crossout and they open it game 1, then we get kind of owned. But if they don't, then we feel fine. But, well, there it is. Maybe we should have summoned out the Sangan just because of that potential outcome. But, I mean, I guess them Nobleman Sangan is better than them Nobleman like Magician of Faith. So there's that. They're going to attack in with a Witch of the Black Forest here, and honestly, I'm fine just summoning out Cannon Soldier, attacking in. We've got Mirror Force to protect the Cannon Soldier, so we feel good about that. They're going to search out a monster here, Mechanical Chaser, makes sense. Main 2, we're just going to set this Call of the Haunted, pass back to them. They're going to bring out a Mystic Tomato, and they're going to try attacking in to the Cannon Soldier. We do have to Mirror Force that, as that's pretty rough if it actually connects. Backup Soldier is okay. We do have 2 pieces in hand, but not really the best right now. We're just going to attack in for another 14 off the cannon soldier. They're going to reborn, targeting Witch. Interesting. I would have thought that they'd crash with the Mystic Tomato here. But that is fine by us. All we've got is a Call of the Haunted. Oh, that makes more sense. They're bringing out Jinzo. So they will be able to clear our cannon soldier this way. They're going to search out a goblin attack force with the Witch. We're in a pretty tough spot here. We'll take 1,000 from that. Main two, they're just going to pass back to us. Premature Burial is okay, but not with a cannon soldier engraved. This is very unfortunate. We could potentially have just premature burialed the cannon soldier to act as a body on board, and also to give us a sort of spell to recycle with Magician of Faith, but this is looking pretty bleak for us. They're going to fire Painful Choice, and things get even bleaker. They're going to send the 3 hand rips and Pot of Greed and Premature Burial. I think honestly we want to give them a hand rip. Maybe Forceful, honestly. Yep, we give them Forceful. And they are going to summon out a Mechanical Chaser attacking first with Jinzo. And we don't have any spells engraved, so we won't be able to get that back with Magician of Faith. They're going to attack him with Mechanical Chaser, fire Forceful Sentry, shuffle back one of the legs. We're in a pretty tough spot here. We need to draw something pretty good. Mystic Tomato is pretty good. I'll say that. We'll set the Mystic Tomato, pass back to them. Unfortunately, they have Raigeki, and that will just be the end of the game. So, maybe if we had summoned Sangan the first turn instead of setting it, things would have worked out differently for us. But, you know, hindsight's 20/20, and we did what we did. So, didn't quite work out that game. Maybe game 2 will go a little bit better. So, let's see how that goes. So, we are going to go first here, as we did lose game 1. And we draw a similar opener to before, but we're going to start by firing the Thunder Dragon here. And firing our draw spells, because we drew all of them. And that's extremely good. I think the move here, honestly... Oh, we're setting Magician of Faith. Okay, that's the better move. I was going to say the move here is summon Sangan, set Call. But this is much better, because then we can get back Pot of Greed, get a ton of draws. If they Nobleman, it's essentially deck thinning. Like, it's unfortunate, obviously, because Magician of Faith is a very powerful card. But, you know, ultimately it's one card deeper into our deck, and at least they're not Noblemanning like a Sangan or Morphing Turn number 2. So, we'll set the Magician of Faith, pass back to them. They're going to summon out Mechanical Chaser, attack in to our Magician of Faith, and luckily we will be able to get this Pot of Greed back. So we're feeling very good about this. They're going to pass back to us, and we draw the head. We're getting very close to winning the game through Exodia. There was lag, so unfortunately we accidentally drew 3 there. But we'll just play as if we don't know what the top card of the deck is. We summon out Sangan, Fisher away that Mechanical Chaser, and attack in for 1,000 here. We're feeling pretty good. We've got Call of the Haunted to bring back the Sangan later. So we can Sangan, search a piece, Call the Haunted it back, and then search another piece. Maybe we should have actually not Fishered the Mechanical Chaser and just gone for 2 pieces here. But we can't win this turn through this method, so I didn't really feel comfortable doing it. And then, since we are at 7 cards at the end of the turn, we are going to discard the Thunder Dragon. We've got another in hand in case we do want to tribute over the Sangan, but we don't really need to, and we like all of our other cards in hand too much to discard them. So we're going to discard that. They're going to set 1 and pass back to us. This is a bit iffy. We're going to set this Sangan here, switch a Sangan to defense, and hopefully this will just be the end of the game, because if they summon out a monster with over 1,000 attack next turn, I think we basically win, unless they've got Nobleman of Crossout, of course. But they're going to fire a Raigeki here, so we'll get 2 piece searches. And we feel pretty good about this. They're going to flip up Mass Sorcerer, summon out a Mechanical Chaser, and we could potentially just let this go through in case they've got like a Mystical Space Typhoon to chain to our Call of the Haunted. That would be pretty rough. But I feel like we can be fine just firing the Call of the Haunted here, bringing back the Sangan. If they've got Mystical Space Typhoon, they've got Mystical Space Typhoon. But if they don't, we basically just win the game here. They're just going to go to main 2, and they're going to Snatch Steal the Sangan. Makes sense, as, you know, they're depriving us of that search the only way they know how. We will gain 1,000 for that, but we do have this Giant Soldier Stone to hit over the Sangan. So this will just be the end of the game. So we finally assemble Exodia. So Very nice there, and I think that we assembled it pretty handily, There wasn't much our opponent could do to really stop this, and occasionally the deck can perform like that. So I do think it's a deck to watch out for. Hopefully in game 3 we'll be able to replicate the success, but we'll just have to see. I mean, after siding, it's a lot harder for Exodia to actually win, even though we did win that game too. But let's hope that we can pull it out here. So we are going to go second because, they lost that game, so they get to go first. And they draw, and this is a bit worrying. They say, hopefully I can win the game on the spot, so we're a bit fearful here. They're going to fire Confiscation, and they're going to actually take the right arm, which is very interesting given that we've got a powerful spell in the form of Pot of Greed there. But this is a bit worrying, as it does mean that they might have a Soul Release, and it seems like they do. So Soul Release will be able to get rid of that piece. There's no way to actually get an Exodia piece back after it's been banished in this format, so this does just cut us off from our Exodia win condition for the rest of the game. However, we could concede here, given that our alt win con is gone, but we can still win through damage. We've done it a couple games in the past. So we're just going to play it through. We're at 8,000, so still very early in the game. And we could just win, just through typical means. Of course, we have 5 bricks now, but not the worst thing in the world. So we're going to bring out this Giant Soldier Stone. They will trap hole that, but we've got a Last Will here. We're going to bring out a Witch. That way we can search out some good monsters later. And we're just going to attack in for 1,100. Main 2, we're going to set this Mirror Force, pass back to them. And they're going to summon out a Mechanical Chaser. They will attack in for 750. We could fire Mirror Force here, but honestly, given that we get a search off this and we do have Fisher, we feel perfectly fine letting that go through. So they're just going to pass back to us. We draw swords, which is pretty nice. We're going to summon out the Sangan, fire a Fisher, and attack in for 1,000 damage here. We're going to pass back to them, and they're going to summon out another Mechanical Chaser, so they'll be able to attack in for 850. We could fire the Mirror Force here, but again, since Sangan will search us another monster, we don't really feel the need to do that. Main 2, they're just going to pass back to us. We draw a backup soldier, which is pretty nice. We're going to set this Morphing Jar number 2 to hopefully shuffle in their monster into the deck. And we're also going to set this backup soldier. It's not live yet, but it's kind of a lot less useful for us, given that we can't win through Exodia. So if this baits out some spell and trap removal, we are fine with that. They're going to attack in with the Mechanical Chaser. That will shuffle that Mechanical Chaser back into deck. And, it just hits another Mechanical Chaser. That happens sometimes. A bit unfortunate for us, but we can run over that with Sangan next turn, potentially. They're going to set one pass back to us. We draw Mystic Tomato, which could be good to bring out instead of the Sangan, but we're just going to go for the Sangan. This way, if they really want to protect their Mechanical Chaser and they've got a Trap Hole or Mirror Force, they'll have to use it on a Sangan, which is a lot worse for them than using it on a Mystic Tomato. So we're going to clear that Mechanical Chaser. They're going to fire a Forceful Sentry and take this Tomato, which is a bit unfortunate, but we can just search it back with Sangan, so not the worst thing in the world. They're going to Snatch Steal our Sangan, bring out a Dark Elf, and try attacking in for 3k. And you know what? We're just going to take it. They're taking 1,000 off the Dark Elf. We gain back 1,000 next turn off our Sangan. We're feeling perfectly fine with this, and we also have a Sword Revealing Light if we really want to punish them for that Snatch Steal. So we gain 1,000, and we're just going to fire Dark Hole instead because we do get a search here. And we do clear their board, so we grab back a Mystic Tomato here, summon out the Mystic Tomato, attack in for 1,400. And we're feeling pretty good in 2 turns. If they don't have a way to stop this Mystic Tomato, we just win. If they try attacking over the Mystic Tomato, we do have a Mirror Force. So we feel very happy about this. They're going to Monster Reborn, targeting their Mechanical Chaser. Seems like they don't want to bring back Dark Elf, given they're at such low life. And they're going to attack in to our Mystic Tomato. We could Mirror Force this, but honestly, we're fine just bringing out another Mystic Tomato. We want them to commit more to board before we fire the Mirror Force. Mystical Space Typhoon's okay, but we're just going to switch the Mystic Tomato, set the Mystical Space Typhoon, and pass back to them. We're just trying to get them to commit more to board so we can bait out the Mirror Force here. They're going to attack in with Mechanical Chaser, and we're going to bring out another Mystic Tomato. and they're going to pass back to us. We draw Giant Soldier Stone, which is pretty good as a defensive option, but we don't really feel the need to commit to board. They haven't used up any board clears, so we're fine just leaving the tomato on field. They're going to try attacking in, and here we will actually pull the trigger, firing off a Mirror Force, as this is our last Mystic Tomato, and I do think it's good enough to try and preserve. They're going to set one, summon a Dark Elf, and pass back to us. We feel perfectly fine about this. We're going to set a Giant Soldier here. Dark Elf can't get over that, and we're going to pass back to them. They're going to Mystical Space Typhoon, targeting our Mystical Space Typhoon, so we feel very good about this. We'll fire a Mystical Space Typhoon. We're going to target their first back row. Maybe we should have targeted the new one, but I just wanted to get rid of that, as it had been on field for a while. So, unfortunately, they didn't really have any profitable things to bring back in a chain here. If they had a Recruiter Engraved, they could have chain called the Haunted, brought that back, but I feel pretty good about that Mystical Space Typhoon. They're going to fire a Nobleman of Crossout, which will banish this Giant Soldier Stone. Quite unfortunate there, but better that than banishing the Magician of Faith, which we will indeed set here. I think we could just win the game. Yeah, if we get back Fisher, we basically win the game with that Magician of Faith. So we're feeling pretty good about this. We'll set these Swords of Revealing Light, as if they do use Spell and Trap removal on it, it would have died to Spell and Trap removal anyways, so it's not that big of a deal. They draw Change of Heart. Wow. That is an insane top deck. So they're going to be able to flip up this Magician of Faith, grab back a Snatch Steal, and deplete our life points by quite a bit. This is pretty brutal. So they are indeed going to attack with the Dark Elf here. We do get Magician of Faith back, but we're at 250, which is very worrying. Standby phase, we will gain 1,000 from the Snatch Steal. And we do have Painful, so we could go for something good here that can deal with this board. We are going to fire the Painful, and Painful has the added benefit of just being able to send the Exodia pieces that we don't want to draw here. So they are going to say that's okay. We're going to send the Exodia pieces we don't want to draw, and honestly, since we haven't drawn Thunder Dragons, we might as well send those too. So this Painful is basically purely deck thinning at this point, which I think is honestly worth it, given that we kind of are in a top deck war. We do have 2 cards in hand, but they're useless, so we feel fine just sending that. We get the head back, and we'll switch the Magician of Faith to defense, set the head, and fire these swords, passing back to them. Hopefully if they can't deal with the swords, then we just gain a bunch of life points and claw our way back here. Change of Heart's very nice. We gain 1,000 from that. We could potentially just win the game here. If we Change of Heart the Dark Elf, attack into the Mystic Tomato, bring out Cannon Soldier off Mystic Tomato, then we do have enough fodder to kill them here. So we are going to try and go for that. Fire the Change of Heart on the Dark Elf. This can backfire if they've got a Woboku, but if they've got something like Mirror Force, honestly, we don't really care because it's clearing one of their own monsters. So we're fine with this. They do have Mirror Force indeed, so kind of unfortunate, but again, we don't really care. We're still in a very good position, gaining life points every turn, and threatening lethal out of nowhere if we can attack over the Mystic Tomato. They are going to Dust Tornado our swords in the end phase, which is kind of unfortunate, but they can only bring out 2 monsters max, so we feel perfectly fine about this. They're going to attack into the head with the tomato, attack into our Magician with the Sangan. Main 2, they'll pass back to us. We gain another 1,000 here, and Backup Soldier is honestly a pretty good draw, as Backup Soldier can get us back this Giant Soldier of Stone, which they don't really have a good way to get over. We're going to set an additional piece, pass back to them. This should hopefully protect us. If they draw Goblin Attack Force, I think that loses us the game here. But other than that, I think we're fine. Maybe we should have actually Backup Soldier preemptively, grab back the Giant Soldier to set that, because then they'd have to attack into that with the Goblin Attack Force. So I think this was a slight misplay here, but it looks like it doesn't actually end up mattering. So they're going to attack into our 2 sets, clear both of those, and they'll set one, so in the end phase we will fire a Backup Soldier, just in case it's something that can potentially stop this. I'm not sure what would, but it's worth doing, I think. So we're going to grab a Giant Soldier Stone and 2 pieces here. So we feel perfectly fine about that. We draw Mystical Space Typhoon, so actually this might just be the end of the game. They have used up Mirror Force, so they can't use that anymore. So I think we're fine, honestly, just going for it. We're going to Mystical Space Typhoon, that Snatch Steal. Looks like they've got an IO for that, but IO will negate their own snap steal, so we do get back the Mystic Tomato here. And this will be the end of the game unless they've got a Karibo. So that will indeed be the end of the game. So I think that these matches surprisingly showed the potential that Exodia has. And I say surprising because we only won one game through Exodia itself. I do think that that one game showed how powerful the deck can be when things go right and you're actually able to draw Exodia. But I think the other games also showed how powerful the deck can be even if it loses its Exodia win condition. Things like Backup Soldier being able to recycle Giant Soldier Stone is very good at stalling your opponent for a bit. And things like Cannon Soldier and Last Roll can make for some very explosive plays that can potentially kill your opponent out of nowhere. To be fair here, our opponent was playing cards that did deplete their life points, so maybe if this was a more standard good stuff deck, we wouldn't have actually won this final match. But I think the game where we basically won when our opponent had 7,400 life points out of nowhere, I think that does show how powerfully damaging this deck can be if things go right for it. But what do you all think about this deck? Do you think that it should be playing things to recover the head with things like Monster Recovery, or do you think that it's fine as is? Or do you think that I'm just overestimating this deck's power and that I just got some lucky games here while most of the time the deck will not perform well? Let me know down in the comments below. I look forward to chatting with you as always. And until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.